Are you running a transitional housing facility and want to protect your property, yourself, and your residents? Well, the key lies in a rock-solid structure, one that not only creates accountability, but also leverages the power of trust ownership to safeguard your investment. So in this episode, I'm going to guide you through structuring your facility for long-term success while creating a safe and thriving environment for everyone. And you're wanting to stay tuned until the end because I'm going to talk about the most powerful tool you can use to make sure that happens. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you're laying the groundwork of basically your policies and procedures. And most people forget that part. If you don't have clear house rules that everyone must follow, you are going to fail. You have to make sure that you're defining what type of expectations you have. If you're going to have a curfew, which we don't have a curfew for any of the properties that we serve, and if you've got policies related to visitors being at the property, having that clarity is going to help you be successful up front. And we make sure at the very beginning, and we reinforce on multiple occasions, that they know what these policies are. You also want to make sure that you have agreements in place. Now, I don't use the term lease because this is not a landlord tenancy arrangement that you're creating. We have contracts. We have agreements with the residents to make sure they understand what those clear expectations are, responsibilities, and then what the consequences are when there is a violation. And you have to be careful when you are creating those documents because those documents can make or break you, and you want to make sure that you're not only protecting your residents, but you're also protecting yourself. So having very clear guidelines related to what is expected will help you be successful long term. Another thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you know what those boundaries are, not just for staff, but also for residents. You want to make sure that your staff is trained well on what they can and cannot do because you must follow policies and procedures, and making sure also that you're maintaining a professional relationship with the residents and making sure that you're following all fairness and policies related to how you place people in properties, because we want to make sure that we're following a fair process and evaluating anyone who comes into the property. So making sure you know those boundaries up front is critical. Now, after you have that groundwork in place, that solid foundation, then you can start adding other elements. Another thing that you're looking at is how do you protect the property? Now, you protect the property by making sure that you have regularly scheduled inspections of the property at all times, making sure the residents know when you're coming in and coming out of the property, the way in which you do that, the way in which you come in and inspect it to make sure there's no damage, making sure there's cleanliness, if there's any repairs that need to be made. Like, these are things that you must do to make sure that this property can successfully be executed on a long-term basis. You also want to have security systems in place. We've done it all, from having wired camera systems to the basic camera systems that you can place, but making sure you have a process that is making sure you're watching the property and keeping it secure at all times. And that's done in the public areas and not in the private areas. And then a way in which you are giving access to the property through the locking system, making sure that those things are in place properly, because those things do help you successfully run the property. I say with or without those things, sometimes you can't be successful, but we've been doing this for so long. We're so good in the measures in which we put in place to where whether you have those systems or not, it's working smoothly. But if you're new in this area, I strongly encourage you to have some type of security system so that you can monitor what's going on and keep things in place. And then how you protect the property with insurance. Insurance companies have to make sure that the assets that they're protecting run a certain way as well. And there's certain things you say and don't say just to make sure you get the right coverage that you need for the property. Like, there's homeowners insurance, and then there's renters insurance. There's liability insurance. Like, there's so many different areas that you need to make sure that you have the proper insurance coverage to protect the property in case somebody burns the property down in their particular unit, or how it might impact the whole building. Like, there's so many things that you need to think through to mitigate that. And we have developed systems in place that make sure that we have the right insurance coverage, as well as making sure that the liability for the property is covered as well. So when you make sure that property is solid and you've built the best way to protect it, then you can start thinking about the facility and how it's structured itself. Now, let me say, in this particular step here, and it's making that facility a trust property, this here, hands down, has to be the best way that we utilize our properties and structure them right, making sure it's structured right. Many people miss this, and they end up in trouble later on because they're not structured right. So when you can understand the benefits of trust ownership in these properties compared to any other way that it can be owned, you are going to be hands down ahead of the curve before something happens. Now, if you want to know more about how to establish your property as a trust property, I'm going to dedicate an entire series on how to do that. So definitely stay tuned. If you've not subscribed to my channel yet or in getting notifications, go ahead and do that now, because that's the type of information that I will be sharing with you to make sure that you are structured right as it relates to these properties. Now, going further into the benefits, there are key elements of a trust that you must be able to put in place. And when you have individuals who are in the property, and this is trust property, they are getting the benefits of this property. So those guidelines that you have set up, they must comply with. So having a clear mission for how that property is utilized is critical to your success, because whenever that they are not complying with those things, they can't stay at the property. It's as simple as that. So you want to make sure that you have the property structured right and that it is set up under a trust property so that you can have the protections that you need to protect you as well as other residents who stay there. Because at the end of the day, our goal is to keep the peace. And by having that property structured right with specific guidelines that must be followed by everybody in the property, there's nothing else you can say. They have to comply. So that's what I love about how you're structured. And we could talk more in detail about what that looks like if it ever comes to a point where that is challenged, so that you are protecting not just you and the property, but you're protecting the residents at the property as well. Now, there are so many advantages that you will have when you structure your property as trust property, which I said we'll go into more detail when we go into our series on structuring your properties right into a trust property. So be looking out for that. Now, one of the most powerful ways in which you can be able to be successful in how you are protecting the residents is making sure that you onboard them properly. When you can empower your residents for success in these properties, you are hands down ahead of the game. This is more than just putting someone in a property and then walking away. You want to make sure they understand what they're coming in the door with and what is expected of them up front. And the best way to do that is making sure that you have an onboarding orientation. When you can onboard them properly into the properties, you're setting clear guidance to what to expect when new residents come on board. They understand what the rules are, they understand what the resources are, as well as the opportunities that you offer them by having them stay in the property. You're also providing those training services that we've talked about, because remember, this is more than housing. This is a program. It's transitional. You have training in place in addition to having a place for them to live, so that you're offering those services to them. So giving them training in life skills, financial literacy, job placement, learning how to live for free, learning how to get back to life. Those are the things that they value. So making sure that you're empowering them with the resources that you say you're going to give them is critical. And one of the ways in which you can do that is by creating accountability for individuals when they come into the housing. I find that when you compare residents with other mentors and other case managers to help them be successful in reaching whatever their personal and professional goals are, that is the power that you offer them. So when you're looking out specifically for that resident and making sure they get what they need, hands down, this is golden. This is more than housing. Remember, transitional housing maximized. Now, this last piece here that we will talk about is making sure that, heaven forbid, something happens, you've got crisis management in place and crisis prevention. Your goal is to ensure that, heaven forbid, something happens, you've got a plan in place to protect them. So you want to make sure that you have an emergency plan in place that basically establishes whatever those detailed protocols are for any type of medical emergencies, or if there's a fire or any type of disruptive behavior. And it can be that range. You can get something as hard as, someone's life is threatened. What is it that you do? How do you protect each other? How do you help each other out of those situations? So making sure that you have a detailed protocol that you will follow in case of medical emergencies and fires, or even if it's just disruptive behavior. Let's say two guys don't get along. How do you manage that? You need to have a process in place that talks about how you manage that. How do you deal with conflict? So being able to set up a system for how you're addressing disputes among residents, or how you deal with any issues between staff and residents. Those are the things that you have to be thinking about as you're moving forward. And most importantly, as you look at all of these crisis management prevention measures, this one's the most important, and that is making sure that if individuals who are utilizing substances that you do not allow, that you have a way that you manage that too. Having guidelines so they understand, what are the things that, you are saying in this property. This is a drug-free, alcohol-free environment. So knowing those things up front in our policy related to that. Even if you're talking about a state where maybe marijuana is now legal, how are you managing that in your facility? Because if you don't allow it, you need to make sure that you've done that. But then you go a step further, is what support do you offer individuals who do violate? Let's say that you have a recovery program and someone relapses. How are you managing that? How are you maintaining the safety of everyone who's in that property? Those are the things that you should be thinking about as you are talking about structuring your property. So those are some key points that you need to focus on as you are structuring your transitional housing facility. You want to make sure that you are creating rules that talk about how successful you can be, because it's about building a foundation that protects your property, protects your peace of mind, and it protects your residents that are there as well in their future. And so by making your facility a trust property and making sure that you have that critical layer of protection and sustainability, that is what you really are thriving for and want to push for. So hopefully I gave you some actionable insights that you can utilize right now. And be sure to share this information with others if you know someone else in this space, and be sure to subscribe. And I love to hear your comments as we talked through how you can build trust properties and structure things well. I love to hear your comments on how you can make a difference in the property that you have. So let's keep creating the lasting impact that we want to create, and let's do that together.